Yeah, it can change very quickly.
Yeah. So I really felt like my main focus was somehow we have to get out of this room. And he was quite afraid. I mean, I believed his fear. And so, at a certain point, he signaled for me to come over to him. I didn't really want to. I also didn't want to misunderstand. So I indicated a question. He then came over to me and he was going to write on the papers that I was working on. And honest to God, this is the funniest, strangest, most school-marmy thing I have ever done. I grabbed his sweatshirt and I yanked on it and I said, wait. And I gave him a piece of scratch paper. So he did not write on my student portfolio. And then he wrote something that was incomprehensible, like almost like hieroglyphics. He sighed very heavily, like, oh, this is not going to work. Mm-hmm. And he went back to the door and he stood there holding his knife and I stood where I was standing. No, I think I was sitting. And then he indicated to get up. And then he came over to me and he was standing with the knife, like really like right at our chins. Mm-hmm. And he said, I have an idea. If you are with me, they won't do anything. And I said, you're taking me out of here at knife point? And I looked at this blade that was, an inch away from my face. Mm-hmm. And because I was picturing, the movie scene or whatever. Right. And, stay back, I've got the... And so anyway, he kind of looked at that and he looked at me and he said, no. And he put it back in his hand with the knife back in the kind of kangaroo pocket of the sweatshirt. And then he indicated to come to the door and we opened the door and no one was in the little hallway and we went out and no one was in the big hallway. And then we went down the stairs and he jumped up about halfway down the stairs. He jumped up on the ledge like he was going to jump over and run away from the second floor. And when he jumped up there, he did not say, come with me. And I had sort of thought, like, if I get to the bottom and he still wants me to come, then I could start fighting and screaming. But, so anyway, once he jumped up there, I was like, oh, he doesn't need me. He's not concerned. And I began to hang back and then he ran away. And so that was a very, very, very intense thing. And what they say, like, your legs turn to jelly. Yeah. This turns out to be incredibly apt as metaphor. So true. I fell back against the wall. There was a professor of, I think, religion coming down the stairs behind me. And, he sort of stopped and we talked and he took me back to my office and then I waited for the campus police to come and, but all the sort of attention and focus on just sort of getting through it, when that went away, I was just made of nothing. So anyway, that's the backstory for this poem. You want me to read?
Oh, please, yeah.
Okay. Having been briefly held hostage by masked man with knife. Sunday, in the grocery store, I wheel my cart toward the back corner by the cold cuts and box wine. Out of nowhere, hyperventilation launches in my chest, and tears. Ridiculous. Then Monday comes, and I need coconut, aiming to be normal, care for someone else. I drive over and pulling in another blast of sobs. What's up with the safe After a week, I went to the kind of yoga they do in the dark. Clench and release, not for exercise, but to relax. Bolstered corpse pose for an hour. The floor was surely level, but I kept flinching as if to catch myself from sliding off, until I saw the raven and realized that over some long while I'd fallen pretty far into my mind's recesses. I had been so good, right arm, right leg, and forehead, left arm and leg, but now I saw my body on a tarmac, and hopping in the dour way of ravens came the raven, dream intrusion in the stubborn body purge. Thought and memory were the names of old Norse birds, little pets to the god of war. My raven came toward the pie graph shape between my legs, splayed open on the concrete, engine oil stains. Oh, there you are, I thought, still with me. Agile, pearlescent, a messenger? Of morning or of luck? The teacher said, come on back to the sound of my voice. Feel your hands against the mat. Which one was it, I wondered? Thought, i.e. not knowing, or memory, reiteration? Why a tarmac? My body laid out where it could never be, amid signals and departures. The noise there, fat tires of the trucks. How quickly the incident became a dream rotation, the assailant fearful and sure-footed in person, locking the door without leaving fingerprints, later making his cat-like leap to the balcony wall. but sleep or pseudo-sleep transformed him all kinds of ways. Conversion to acquaintance, threatening at home, not work. Then other forms, the raven, the canal, and then himself again. He wears the black bandana he breathed and spoke through, his wide fingernails and tattooed central fingers, line drawings in plain black. Prison tats, someone said. The sheepish way he tucks the knife into his sweatshirt as he explains his exit plan. Everyone wants to tell me who approves, among their friends and confidants, of what I did and didn't do. Or I sought approval. There is no way to register the story I have learned and not evaluate the victim. I lived, so lucky me, or I did well, or the whole story's overblown. I know I've never been so on, alert. Fear came much, much later as a force I could identify. Now I go to Yoga Nidra every week. A contract with myself, a duty to reckon with whatever needs to surface. Secret compartments in the floorboards, ravens or one raven picking at junk jewelry on my bed. In the dream I last remember from before, my husband hanged himself, just as I was leaving in the car. I saw his silhouette in the door's frosted glass. I ran back in, too late. Memory pecks away at thought. Vice versa, too. What happened to that guy? Did he rape or kill some other person? After he ran so hard away? Maybe he just slept it off.
Before we talk about the poem, I have to say you have a wonderful reading voice.
Oh, thank you.
And that's not something that you can say about a ton of poets. I don't know what happens if there's not... I don't need somebody to be performative necessary, but just to read something with some feeling would be nice. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what that is about some people who just can only read deadpan for the entire, and then they'll talk and they'll be totally normal. Yeah. But then they have this very distinct reading voice.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is in some people a fear of being too sentimental or sort of over manipulating with your voice, and I think in other people there's a desire to just honor the poem as it looks on the page, and like. Louise Glick is somebody who reads very beautifully in that style. And I think in some ways people imitate her, and that's why they get to this other thing, which is more of a sort of droning with that lifting. And that is not what she sounds like. But I think it is a kind of mistaken adoption of her tactic, which is really meant to let the poem sort of float there in the air like it would sitting on the page. But I know what you mean. There is there are people who overdo it,
yes,
and there are people who corrupt it in some way,
right.
So that it's really even hard to stay with the syntax and with the sentences because of the weird.
Well, and then I mean the way that you read, you can is a way that I don't know. I think it brings something to the poem, and. Which I think is the reason for going to a reading is to have something augmented for you as well, and it also brings a different sort of interpretation to it because you only read things in the voice in your head, and that colors things as much as we as the author of that poem want people to read it and interpret it in the way that we intended. It's always going to be processed through whoever is reading it, but so. The thing that like really got to me was the like standing in the Safeway, and having like that. It's you don't process things. We don't process things as they happen so well, especially in a situation like that where you are needing to be in that moment and only think of, like how your behavior could affect this, an outcome of something, or, needing to be on high alert, being on, as you were saying. And then there's this. What that captures to me so well is that there's this moment where there's that release of like you had all of this stuff that you just were not allowing yourself to process at this point, and it just kind of there's this explosion of whatever chemical, and it's I mean, how can you deal with that? And then you sort of speak to the process. And also, at the end, I was like, did they not catch this guy? Yeah. And that to me, I mean, you always have that sort of looming over you, and you don't have that closure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I've been a very, very, very lucky person, and I had never really had any kind of close call like that before. And I understood that I needed to take all the advice. I needed to do whatever I could to sort of process it and move through it. And it was tricky. I mean, I knew people who very much sort of came at it from a how did you let this happen to yourself sort of a standpoint, which was painful. And I knew my own tendency would be to say I'm fine, and to kind of, I sort of somehow I had the lucky wisdom of knowing that I couldn't do that to myself, and that I also couldn't listen to the people who were kind of blamey, and so I just tried to be a good listener to myself. And so the Safeway thing is a joke, right? I'm in the store that has the word safe in the name. Yeah. That's why I'm freaking out here. Right. Like my sense of belief in that word and that name is compromised. And so of course I'm a poet. It gets under my skin to be in this place. And so like that was happening. And then those weird sort of half waking dreams. I mean, yoga nidra is like sleep yoga. Like you don't, it's not exercise. You lie on the ground and you clench and you let go. And then there's this sort of guided meditation, but it's very, the idea is that your body goes to sleep and your mind stays awake. And my mind really didn't quite always stay awake. I mean, it was hovering in this place, and I thought this is actually a way that I'm safely opening up my subconscious. I'm having this weird almost nap in this public, I was at a class with all these people around me. And so that business of feeling like the ground was, I was going to slide off. Like if I was on the plank of a ship and I was going to fall into the sea, like that kept happening. I would flinch, and I would grab the ground and I realized, oh no, here I am. It's okay. But being in those classes was huge for me in terms of just sort of letting all that stuff play out in whatever way your imagination helps you, symbolize and process and be done with things. And I first couple of months I was hyper vigilant and nervous, and not that much later, I think because of the luck of these yoga dreams, basically, I was so much better. And we were lucky that we moved buildings at ASU, so I didn't really have to spend much time in that building after this happened.
Gotcha.
And I taught in there this semester for the first time since we moved. And I definitely had residual little panic feelings at the beginning of the semester when I was walking over and there was the staircase and there were these, and I was like, oh, it's there, it's in there. But I don't know. I mean, so often in my teaching career, I've been in conversations about, where you have students who are sent by their therapist to process their experience. And there's especially when I was a young teacher, there was a kind of hard ass, like, that's not what this is for. We're doing art here. And at the same time, I just know in my life that writing through my own experiences has helped me recover from them in whatever ways. Right. And so on the one hand, I believe art is different from therapy in a very serious way, but I also think that art can give you the kind of purge and the kind of attention and direct address of things and the reckoning with them that you need to heal from them. And
the tools to process. Yeah. How long was it between the incident and being able to write about it for you?
Oh, the incident was December of 16, and I think that I started that poem around the time of the events in it, right? Like I had registered the Safeway question and the sort of pun in it, and I knew that the Raven image in that dream was just really interesting, and And I could feel the